Oh, yeah. Wait a minute, why did I say yeah? There we go. Welcome out to the Remix Morning Show. Right here on Black Liberation Media. In case you didn't know, I go by the name of the Ear Doctor. Thank y'all for rocking out on this beautiful day. We talking about November the 5th. We got that boom bap breakfast for you. We got our crew coming through, ready to do what they do. So let me introduce them to you. Let's start off with my brethren, Evan. And she stayed executing. She goes by the name of Jackie Logan.
Jackie!
Oh my God, I'm so tired.
Welcome to the Tire Bunch.
Oh God. Why did I get into this? Jesus Christ.
Hey, you can't help it. It's your love for the people, Jackie. You say, you know what? I gotta come and show my love for the people and get love from your peoples right here on the screen. So big up. Good to see you.
I need to love people like the Pope loves people, like from his Pope mobile, from afar.
I like that. With the
throwing out blessings and going on back home.
I can see that. I can see that. I can see that. Where you been? Where you been, kid? Twin?
Detroit yesterday and the day before yesterday. Cleveland for the next couple of days. Until Friday morning. And then that's the first leg of this, but then there will be more. But you know, that's organizing. I chose it, and this is the time for this. So
now you say the first leg. What does that mean? You running around with a candidate, or y'all doing some organizing with?
No, I'm never doing that again. No.
Okay, no. I remember.
Never
I was like,
have to worry about me ever doing that again. That's some things you only need to experience one time in life. I had my one experience. Thank you so much.
The money looked good at the time. Was that it? Did you really believe? Did you believe?
No, I think it was, you know, it was the experience. It was, for me, it was the experience that I did not have. And it was one of those things where it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. You don't know that whether you're ever going to get that kind of opportunity again. And then for me, I realized if anybody ever gave me the opportunity again, it probably wouldn't be with the party that I did do it with, the Green Party. So I would. And even if somebody offered, you know, hey, this is a new campaign for the Green Party, I'd be like, no, deuces, thank you. I'll watch a live stream, but don't ask me to come and do anything.
Are those the type of blankets in the background that make you like mad sweaty, or like, you know, those?
No, it's cold in here. It is so cold in here. It's cold in here, and I'm like, okay, I understand it's November, but can it not be cold in the hotel room?
Right, 30-some degrees outside.
It's I'm not. No. This is but
those,
here I am.
Be those blankets. I gotta change shirts just because I'll be sweating.
No,
anyway,
not even.
Enough about me and my pores. Evan, what's good?
Just that transition is rough, but
yeah,
right. Yeah. I'm doing good. I'm better now that I see Jackie. You know what I mean? I was worried I was gonna be up here by myself again.
Worried? Wait. Did we not represent yesterday?
We did. You know, we got there.
I almost feel like I was hearing a but.
No. But my own insecurity.
Well, I'll tell you who's not insecure. Erica Kane.
Hey.
She might be frozen, but she ain't insecure.
Yeah.
Oh, we might have to rock just the. We might have to do a Renee on you, Erica.
Nah, I'm gonna come back. I think that happens every time I turn my camera on and
Okay. Well, we'll see
Oh.
you in a minute.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got a full house here without two white twins. So listen,
What?
we got a
What?
Huh?
full house. The show.
With no, that's not
Oh,
with the who?
Don't they
with
got two white twins?
twins because they're. I guess they had twins.
Maybe I'm too. You get some coffee, y'all. I'm too fast for y'all.
Do we have white twins? Did something happen last week that I don't know about? That
This is a full
we
house without the
acquired
two
some white twins from somewhere.
This is a full house without the two white twins.
Oh, without the. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Forgive me. Forgive.
I'm used to.
I misunderstood.
I'm used to being intellectually ahead of some. So let's try this again. Erica Kane. All right, I see a little movement.
There we go. There we go.
Uh-huh. Yep. Let it catch up. There we go. There it is. Yeah.
6'7".
Oh God. No. I don't. The one thing that is worse than having to catch different modes of transportation that's not airplanes to get from one city to another, just because the distance is really, really short, but for an airplane, but is that when you get to your destination, your Lyft driver at 2:00 in the morning is playing mumble rap and I'm just
yeah.
There's no hope. There's no hope for this generation, y'all. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
With that said, I was just at a school teaching a middle school, and I was showing them different genres of music and just saying like how you need to expand your diet intake of music. So hopefully that class will examine some more music. We just got to expose them to it. That's all. When it's shoved down their throat all the time.
Oh, we were exposed to it. Shoved down. It was the longest 8-minute Lyft ride of my life. Just God.
Tell you who can lift us up. Come out, K. Franklin.
What's going on?
Hey.
Wow.
Ooh, who's in a nice hotel?
Hey.
Oh, I can go back to bed. Okay.
That's how I thought. I was like, I saw these faces on the screen. Erica.
I bullied
Erica.
you?
I love you, girl.
How are you?
I love you. You know what I'm talking about.
I know. Allegedly.
Wait.
Oh my God.
Wait a minute. What's going on here?
I haven't seen Kamau.
She has a feeling of disrespect, and it's never ever been that. Ever, never, ever. Evan. I love you too. Man. I love you too.
Now you know my name, Kamau?
I decided to stop with Bryce. I decided
Come on, man. Bryce.
I know you
grief. What?
I was like, we're gonna fight next time I see Kamau.
See, and I don't want that smoke. I'm too old.
You're big.
I don't know. I can't
guy,
take
man.
you.
Yeah.
I don't even think I can outrun you. You know what I'm saying? What am I going to do?
Probably not. You cannot walk him.
I'm too big and strong. I'm old.
Yeah, Kamau got to rev up before you run.
I got to stand. I'll be like, Evan, give me 2 minutes.
Rev it up with his right foot like he on a motorbike.
Oh, man.
My knee, you stretch, get my knee right. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, Kamau. I see how the grays go with this shirt. I see what you're doing this morning. Listen, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to get there. I got a great
Look at that.
Yeah,
trying to get there.
Yeah. I mean, I still got some time. I only got a strand or two. Miss Keynes, what's going on with you? I ain't seen you in a week.
How old you about to turn? Is your
me?
birthday coming up?
That's right,
Yeah,
November
you
18th. Big 5-0.
Yeah, I think
5-0
you're
5-1.
50. Yeah. What were you saying, Miss Keynes?
I think you have approached the time. You said you still have some time.
Oh yeah. I'm here. You know. All right, listen, we got a guest coming on at 9, I believe. Is that right? To talk about Sudan.
Oh wow.
So y'all definitely
what
and I'm not laughing about
is this?
Huh?
What universe is this where you correctly pronounce another country's name on the first go? How?
Yeah.
Good grief.
Hey.
Marjorie Taylor Greene says things that make sense, and Ear Doctor pronounces a foreign language.
Wow.
Wow.
What kind of upside down backward universe am I living in? What?
Where's Kim with the spaceships? With the
Let's
spaceships.
go back to bed and wake up, and maybe everything will be.
What is it? II Atlas? What is it called?
I Atlas word.
Wow, y'all disrespectful right now.
I was
Wait a minute, is this a new haircut?
school.
Oh, you haven't seen his new
No.
haircut? It is a new haircut.
That's
Hey.
your haircut too? Okay.
Wait a minute, we got 2 days of voting because you're supposed to be in school, my man.
Strep throat.
Ah,
Oh.
well,
School had to go off yesterday. The kids went to school.
no, they didn't.
In Atlanta, they did. Atlanta, everybody went to school.
Yeah, they
No,
went
they
to school
didn't.
here too.
In Atlanta?
My child,
Mm-mm.
well,
Oh, my
okay,
kids'
well, I
school
dropped
went
my
to
child off at the building. And
It split off.
I don't know if it was open or not, but I took it.
When you said I dropped them off and I came back to get them, and it was
Yeah.
no.
I was right back at 2:00.
Dropped her off where he was supposed to be. I don't know where he went after
I don't know
that.
where your teacher's at, but I'm here on time. they better make their way.
So what you get? What you giving them to get better? Some Trimanic?
Western
What's that?
medicine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Just might as well skip it on. Just give them some alcohol and knock them out. That's
Alcohol?
pretty much all medicine is, right?
No,
Out of
no,
here.
Well, that's supposed to be a cure for strep throat for a 10-year-old.
I mean, a hot toddy, right? Duh.
Look at
Oh,
right.
With some honey.
Like he's obviously correct.
The kid is confused.
Hot toddy with some honey and lemon, and he's good. He'll be out. Anyway,
Look at he's looking at you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
he don't even know what a hot toddy is.
He
Exactly.
knows what bad parenting. That's what it is.
Well, you got enough of that. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick break, and then we go come back.
He's like, please don't get my parents picked up by CPS. We got it hard enough out here.
I love my parents so much. Don't.
Come on.
Oh man, I love parenting. All right, let's take a break, and then we're gonna come back, real quick break, and come back with some more right here on no other than the Remix Morning Show. Let's go. Yeah. Okay, let me take you to a time and place, which is right here, November the 5th on the Remix Morning Show. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new to the channel. Go to patreon.com, become a member over there, get footage that's rare, and donate where at blkliberationmedia.org. Let me help you get there even quicker. Take out your phone, or if you're on your phone, get to your computer and hit that code right there, that QR, a bunch of initials, code right there, and it'll take you to the donation screen. You go ahead and donate and get you some merch while you over there. All right, let's talk about it. Let me take you to Jamaica. Yes. I thought I had it ready, but apparently I don't. But I wanted to talk about the man them called Sanchez. Yes, Sanchez. Now, Sanchez is a brother that comes straight out of Jamaica. This dude got like over 20 albums. He got albums with other artists. I mean, mad music put out by this brother. He's came out of Kingston, Jamaica. Like I said, he got his name from a football player that was real nice in Jamaica. But he got down with different sound systems and was doing it all around the place. He came out with his first hit, Lady in Red, back in 1987. And he was one of the biggest singers at that time, especially at the Reggae Sound Splash. And he redid songs, a lot of different songs. He also got on a track with Tracy Chapman called Baby Can I Hold You. And he's just been blowing up and doing this thing ever since. He's big on the cover songs, big on the R&B songs. And right now, he's a full-time producer. He's working with different artists. And at the same time, he's like, let me put out another dancehall album and a gospel album. But we're talking about Sanchez, y'all. Let me give you a little picture of Sanchez if you don't know. All right, with that said, we'll rock out with that. Here's some more Sanchez music, and let's get back to our crew right here on the Remix Morning Show.
Life is no game.
Tanger.
We go up for Sanchez in this house.
Yeah, Sanchez is the man. Who would you could like? Yeah, I know you don't know nothing about him. Your face shows it up. But he was. Would he be on the level of Barris or not yet?
Probably, I think in terms of that
Crooning.
type of music, you know. But when you talked about the cover songs, he has done Shania Twain, Britney Spears. He's done the Sometimes, which is one of the best songs. He does a lot of cover songs.
Okay, he's like a go-go singer.
Can y'all be a little less American on this screen? My God, come out.
What was that unnecessary shade that you threw at?
No, go singer.
Alone. I tried to leave it alone. I knew I was ignorant of the topic, and I tried just to put my head down.
Cover band, that's all. He just does a lot of cover songs.
Not a cover artist.
They do covers, but they're not only cover bands. Don't disrespect Go-Go.
All right. Well,
let's not compare.
Your doc, we're back in the same camping.
He did it.
Yes, yeah, did. Bye. For all the Go-Go fans in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, goodbye.
Nope.
Oh, wow.
Okay. They're all shutting down. All right. So we're here. Who's going to do this for the Remix Morning Show Women's Wednesdays edition? I should not take the lead.
Are we still doing that?
All right. Remix.
I didn't know we had an organization around here, you know.
Welcome to the Remix Morning Show with our hosts, Jackie Lukman, Erica Keynes, Evan, whose last name I still don't know, Kamal K. Franklin here with you on this Wednesday, hoping you give to blokliberationmedia.org. We have a guest coming on at 9. We have a lot of important news to report. Who's got a story for us to start off with?
Well, yesterday was a big one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk about that. Yes, I guess all of the liberals and certainly the conservatives, there must be an exodus of terrified capitalists leaving New York City, like they said, because they threatened that if Zohran, what's his middle name? Kwame Mamdani. Because you have to say it that way, because it's a terrifying name. It's a terrifying commie name. That's how you got to say commie names, except he's not a communist and he's not even a socialist. But they said that if he won, they would leave New York. So that tell me there's an exodus of terrified liberals and conservatives fleeing New York City through all for the thoroughfares this morning, because Zohran Mamdani is now the mayor of New York City. That's not happening. No exodus.
I thought he said that he was going to have Zionists in his cabinet, so I feel like they don't have to go anyplace. They can go to his cabinet.
Can't have Zionists in your cabinet if they're all leaving New York. Huh.
Well, I don't know if they leave in New York. I think they're probably, I think it's interesting that he won. I think everybody predicted that after everything that he would win. I don't see it as a bad thing. I think it's going to be interesting to see the maneuvering, how they sort of, again, if you to believe his political rhetoric or whatever, and he's going to try to do things like free buses, free subways, tax the rich, extended education benefits, doing different things to bring back jobs, and some of his rhetoric around making sure Israel does not get certain treatment in terms of bond buying and the rest of it. I think it's going to be some interesting times, even to see if he tries to carry out some of that agenda. My expectation, obviously, is as he's been doing post the winning, particularly the Democratic primary, he's going to be dialing it back. And I think when he does try certain things, that it'll be interesting to see how the capitalist class, the development class reacts, because they have so many levers. And we've gone through this before. Like, you've had de Blasio twice, who was supposed to be this real left-wing left-wing mayoral person. That was his moniker. He was going to be this left-wing mayoral candidate and mayor of the city, who backtracked at every opportunity, and who was made to heel on certain things. So I think that part will be very interesting to me, not only to see what he attempts, but what the capitalist class does in New York in particular, in terms of bond ratings, in terms of threatening to leave the city, what they do, both above board tactics and dirty tactics to make him heal even more than what he would on his own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. My fault. Go ahead, Erica.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to kick it to you, because I remember saying, like, to my mind, it felt weird to see the capitulation, given that he was supposed to be ahead in the polls and seemed to have this kind of popularity. But I know you were saying, like, he actually did have to. And I was.
Yeah. Well, we going to Islam. That's what I learned from the win. No, I think it was interesting what Kamal said. Based on his rhetoric, and to your point, I was thinking, which rhetoric, but also there is a point of having to, like, when you look at the dynamics of New York City politics, there's parameters that he has to exist within. And so yesterday you were talking about internal colonialism, and I know there was like some pushback in the chat, but I do think it's like a good starting point in terms of like what happens now, right? Because we could like talk about the campaign, but he's won, right? So what does it mean for New York City? And then what does it mean for the Black working class in New York City? And I think it's important to understand, like, what is our like existing material conditions, and what does it mean in terms of his election, right? Because there has been an array of rhetoric. So like, what do we do with that? And I think that that's the conversation that needs to be had, because really the question in terms of his campaign and his ideology, that's a question for his party to resolve, right? They have to contend with that because they ran him and they pushed him, right? So they have to contend with that. We don't. I think the question that we have to contend with is, what does it mean for us at this point? And so I think that's the sort of interesting inroads with these sort of democratic socialists, right? And I think of them sort of like, like the boneless wing kind of thing, right? Like, it's a tender, right? It's you want to be a wing, but it's really a tender, right? But not a wing. So that's how I think about democratic socialists, right? Because I think even to the point of how New York City, the narrative that's coming out in the mainstream that is intentionally conflating socialism, but then also coming out from the left, right? That's intentionally conflating socialism. So I think that there's, if we are going to think about it in this sort of model of socialism, then I do think there's a Lenin-esque approach of what does it mean to engage electoral politics? Where are those particular inroads? Because, the state apparatus, he could be who he is. He could be socialist, but he still exists as a socialist within a state apparatus that only allows for so much, right? And we've seen that countless times previously, in terms of like, what does it mean to run people? What does it mean to engage? And so I think these are continuous questions for us in terms of how we build political power and how do we understand what it means to build political power, even if we see this as a win. So I do think there's like, a praise and victory, because I think it's important that Adams is gone and Cuomo has embarrassed himself to such an extent, that there's no real walking back from that. And the people who have aligned themselves with Cuomo are being, I think, they're also being questioned. Like, I think there has been a class contradiction that has been made completely obvious. Now, I don't think that means in particular that he's going to create a socialist kind of city. New York City is what New York City is, and there's a bit of political delusion that has always existed in New York City, because I think the class dynamics in New York are so. New York City for me is a very interesting city because there's Manhattan, and then there's everywhere else, right? And it's nothing for someone to leave the projects and be in the Upper East Side, right? They don't live there, but you can very much just walk around the Upper East, so there's a way that there's a confusion about people's kind of material conditions because you are that close. People do just see celebrities walking around, you are that close to it, but that's not your life, right? So I do think there's like some conflation there in why people have a particular class allegiance in New York City, despite not having those material conditions, where Adams could be a mayor, where Cuomo could be a mayor. So I do think him becoming mayor is significant because it is speaking to some kind of class acknowledgement to some extent, right? But I think at this point, it becomes like, what do we do with that as organizers? And where if he's saying he's going to do this with the rhetoric, then what are we doing with that rhetoric? How are we holding, those things to pushing him? So I do think that becomes the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a really interesting political. I'm not even sure that I would call it a trend. I don't think I can call it. I can't think of what else to call it, but I feel like this kind of focus on any alternative to the duopoly is kind of where people are. So it makes it easier to give an excuse for trying the DSA way again, even after we've had the experience that we've had with it. Well, not we, sorry, apologies. The experience has been had with DSA and AOC and Bernie Sanders through 2-3 times, and while you don't want to lump all people together in the same, because all right, Mamdani is not AOC, he's not Bernie Sanders, but we do see the same kind of wishy-washy, the DSA representatives, candidates, politicians, whatever, kind of declaring a line, but then receiving a little pushback from the status quo, and then either blurring that line a little back or moving it back a bit, to make more room for dissent or different opinions, whatever excuse they use for the fact that they walk back on what is supposed to be their principles, right, in this political arena. So I started to kind of see some of that with the way Mamdani made the capitulating statements that he did about Zionism, condemning the phrase that he actually never used, globalize the Intifada, and it didn't take a whole lot of pressure for him to come right out and basically throw Palestinians and anti-genocide and anti-imperialist folks under the bus by condemning, a logical and true phrase. Yeah, the fight against genocide, the fight against Zionism, the fight against imperialism has to be globalized, right? It must be. As a matter of fact, it already is, right? We're late. We're late to the party. This country, the people in this country are late to the party, but the rest of the world, particularly the rest of the global South, they've been globalizing the Intifada, right? So I felt like in that way, even for people who are politically not as astute about what the global struggle against imperialism is and has always been, and that it's always included the struggle against Zionism, I felt like that statement in particular was kind of like a thumb in the eye to the left, basically, to the whole left movement around the world. But then, him saying, I'll have Zionists in my cabinet. Like you're gonna put people in you ran on being some type of socialist, some type of person who is not involved in the duopoly, some type of person, a person who has some type of radical politics, even if you won't come out and say leftist politics.
Mm-hmm.
But then you want people to vote for you because of that. But then you want the same people to be okay with having people who support, fund, and if they had a chance would go to Palestine, pick up a gun, and murder Palestinians themselves for the cause of, the Jewish homeland that are on stolen land. That I think is dangerous, because it certainly blurs the line between what socialism really is, what left really is, and the line of what left is. It's already blurred and nebulous, but this doesn't help clear up the conversation among the masses. We are clear, but the masses are not.
Right.
And it's that lack of clarity. It's I think, DSA ran a great strategy, because they did what organizations who are involved in any kind of electoral politics are supposed to do. You lift up, you groom, you cultivate, you run a person for elected office, if that's what a part of your work is, and that's what they did. So I think we should look at their strategy, because the messaging was right, the strategy was good, and it worked, right? But the outcome of that, what is that going to mean in regards to our struggle for real socialism? How do we have that conversation with people who are waiting with bated breath for Zohran Mamdani to transform New York from this, international capitalist capital, basically, into, a people's utopia, whether it's, fully socialist, which of course it's never going to be, or just something nice with free public transportation and universal rent control. And if that's all people are looking for, when they don't even get that, then what? Then what do we do? Like, I'm with Erica. My question with this win for Mamdani is, what are left organizers in New York City going to do with this win in regard to engaging with the people when these disappointments inevitably happen? Because they've already happened and they're not going to stop, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there has been a lot. Like, I appreciate your framing around, like, because in particular, right, even the socialism piece, right? Like, when you watch his interviews, he will never say that he's a socialist. He always corrects people and says, I'm a democratic socialist. It's very much been the white left, that has been washing his kind of like doing cover for him, that constantly refers to him as a socialist, even though he does not, right? And there's been like, the Zionism walk back, right? Of course, right? He accurately called the NYPD racist and homophobic, but then walked that back, right? Because ostensibly with this idea that he has to like work with these people, and he's very afraid of people, losing more. He doesn't want cops to walk off the job, God forbid. So like there's that element, right? Someone put in the chat earlier, right? He called when he had that interview with Jorge Ramos, and Jorge Ramos subjected him to what we call it the Miami baptism, and just kept pressing him on Cuba and Venezuela until he called the leaders dictators, right? So he continuously, right, has kind of made that clear, and I think we've talked about this, or rather, y'all have talked about this on this platform before, about the way that Bernie Sanders in particular, right? The rhetoric was often like, oh, he will popularize these left politics, even if he doesn't, even if he doesn't really represent them, or he's not like enacting them, and we can push that, we can increase people's consciousness, right? But essentially what happened was that he confused people, he muddied the waters on what socialism was, and in the end just became a sheepdog for the Democratic Party at the end of the day, right? And Mamdani isn't the exact same person as AOC or Bernie Sanders, but I don't think it was it wasn't lost on me that they were immediately, whenever you saw him speaking, they were right behind him, you know what I mean? Kind of supporting him. So, if anything,
Obama too.
We say Obama too.
Obama's there too now. But
Obama
I think that's
but Obama never. I mean, this is the interesting part for me. Well, one of the interesting parts, again, is just like all the ways in which the system will now seek to make him heal. Again, and not even suggesting that they have to do much. Like he won't be able to. There's so many institutional levers, like you guys, like the police. Again, the development class, the Wall Street, The capitalist class does not just win because it loses elections. It wins because it's created a system that even when it doesn't have its best candidate or candidate that it most prefers to win, and in this case, I think it's obvious that they did not want him to win. Again, millions and millions of dollars poured into PACs to get Cuomo, forcing Adams to move out the race to get his votes, Republicans coming in and Cuomo going on these Republican channels, Trump endorsing Cuomo. All these different levers are going to be at their beck and call. Schumer never endorsed him. Barack Obama never publicly endorsed him, but claimed to be having private conversations. And we all know what that means.
Right.
Behind the scenes, he's telling you to give up on any idea of radical politics, that even if you don't really have them, that, watch your language. This is how you deal with this. Let me show you how I maneuvered. I'm sure he's going to be pressed with all the ways in which the liberal Democrats themselves will teach those in their left to heal. And when time comes to run for re-election, those same liberal Democrats that pretended to be his friend will put up somebody to challenge him no matter what happens, right? Because they don't want to be associated with that language and or rhetoric no matter what happens. So I think we're in for interesting times. Again, this is no rationale about how he's going to try to do all the things that he said he does or said he wants. I think he does seem to be a little bit of a different politician than Sanders or AOC, but not by much, like my assumption is. And I think, again, as you guys have said, he's already demonstrated his ability to heal when his pastor tells him to heal. How far will that go? I think some of his rhetoric is still pretty left, considering where others are. But this is going to be a very interesting time in New York. And I remember, although I wasn't in New York, when de Blasio again talked about closing Rikers and how that never happened, right? But how there was a grassroots coalition that formed to try to challenge. That coalition, for various reasons, fell apart at some point. But that was a very strong coalition at one point that said, "Oh, you said you're going to close Rikers? Well, let's make sure you close Rikers," and challenged him on his switch, which was about not just closing Rikers, but then opening up 5 individual jails to replace Rikers. So all of those things started to create this idea, like, oh, you're claiming that you're progressive, but yet you're gonna do like basically a little magic trick on us and claim you're closing this big institution and open up these others in these working class communities. Some of them, one of them was supposed to be in Chinatown. So I think there's going to be interesting times to watch and to break apart how capitalists and developers move during this time period, both on the right and the so-called liberal moderates, to squash not only his rhetoric, but any ideas, any progressive ideas that he may be trying to introduce into New York City politics.
And I just want to. Go ahead, Eric. I was going to say, I just wanted to make this last point, because even to the point of AOC and Bernie, I think because the existence, we went through this with them, I think it has helped people be at least more critical of Madami in the sense of, we've seen this kind of pattern before, and and challenging him more around this. But regardless of how good intention one may be, the democratic socialism, or whether or not he is, it still exists within this state apparatus, which is not neutral, right? So it's designed to neutralize radical change, to Kamal's point. So for me, like at this point, the success should be not measured by, what he can actually achieve, but how much we can actually extract from him while he's in office, right? While he's there, how much could we get out of him? How much could we move our forces forward? And I think that should be the consideration, because again, we didn't run Madami, So I think that the question of his rhetoric around Venezuela and Cuba and Zionism, that is a question for that party, right? To resolve. Because if it is that we're saying there's a repeated pattern of running these particular kind of candidates, even if it's a good strategy or not, what is the political objective of that party? And I'm not in that party, right? So that is not a question for me to resolve. But the question for my organization then becomes, what is our objective around what we can get out of this, right? If it is that it is heightening the contradictions between what is and is not socialism, that is an inroad, because I think it took us this far to getting a Madami, right? Because we understood clearly AOC and Bernie are not it. And that took some time because people truly believe we were going to a socialist revolution with these two, where that bubble has been bursted, right? And so now it's more about now it's more like, pragmatism. So people are taking that approach. And, so now they become the kind of lesser evils. But people are not confused that they are not the road to liberation. So I think the conversations have shifted the more that these people come into view about what can and cannot be achieved through these people. But I do earnestly believe that the question for organizations becomes like, how much can we get out of this? Because if this is what he's saying, how do we up the ante?
Yeah. And I think the thing I'm also kind of thinking about is the way he was elected. He was elected by people on the ground. People were canvassing for him. There was lots of grassroots organizing, the stuff that, interestingly, the stuff that people who come into radical organizations and claim they don't know what organizing is, you see it every doggone election. Like, it's not like Republicans and Democrats don't actually use the tactics and strategies and the literal apparatus of organizing to achieve their goals. Organizing is door knocking. It is talking to people. It is canvassing. It is coming together around an idea that a bunch of people agree on, and they get together and they decide how they're going to popularize that idea and how they are going to garner support for that idea among the masses, and how they do all of that, the whole process, coming up with a focus, getting consensus among a group of people, organizing a group of people around that idea, and then getting together and figuring out how we're going to talk to our people about that. That is organizing. And every election, every single election, presidential election, midterm, mayoral, all the in-betweens, they all do it. So I'm looking at the way people are talking about the way Mamdani won with grassroots support, and that's great and that's wonderful. But I'm also wondering, how do we translate the clear understanding of what organizing is to get a political candidate elected in a capitalist state, in a fascist country? Right? How do you understand the mechanisms or the mechanics of organizing to get somebody elected? But we don't see that level of understanding and engagement in pushing other ideas, our ideas. How do we bridge that gap? How do we get those people who clearly understood they needed to door knock to get people to vote for Mamdani? How do we get those people to also be as bought in to the ideas of real socialism, of understanding that this system is imperialist and capitalist, so it doesn't matter what singular person you put in this office. If the state is still a capitalist, imperialist, Zionist, settler colonial state, your outcome is going to be the same for all of the reasons that you all just mentioned. So I'm also kind of wondering how we shift people's consciousness from being willing and ready to put all of this people power into electing someone to public office in a capitalist state. How do we shift that people power to people's movements, real people's movements? And I think that also is an aspect that I think it's very fascinating that, you tell folks, hey, we've got this candidate who is not status quo, he's from this third part, and people are like, yeah, let's get him arrested, let's get him elected. Because at this point, I just want to lock people up. I feel like I'm going full Stalin way faster than I mean to. And I just feel like life is
Soon, Jack. Soon,
Poor
Jack.
Joe.
Jokes, y'all. Jokes. Calm down. Calm down. but I'm also thinking of, now I'm going to leave it here. I'm also thinking of along the lines of strategy that I think we should look at for how DSA was able to elevate their members to elected office like this. I'm looking at that strategy, and I'm looking at the Green Party with a big old side eye. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like, what? What are y'all now? We have already analyzed what the Green Party's weaknesses are and why they haven't been able to achieve this kind of success. And I think we exposed some of that, I think, really well with our interviews here for this last election with a certain former candidate. But I think that is a very interesting aspect of our focus on this that I think we should really be serious about examining, because I think it's very, very important to what an alternative is in electoral politics. What does that look like? Because once this system is gone, we are still going to have elections. So what does that look? What does real democracy look like with a party like DSA or the Green Party if we don't have a Democratic and a Republican party, if we don't have a duopoly anymore? What does our idea, the people's idea, a liberation-focused idea of democratic elections look like? And for people who don't know anything about Cuba, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, China, Vietnam, and all these kind of things, we have to be the ones to start that conversation and push those ideas.
My fault. Come on. I didn't mean to interrupt. I don't know what this person's intent was, right? But Corey asked, what does Black liberation media actually support, right? So maybe we can highlight, organizing, obviously, joining an organization. I'd like to address that, just to clarify.
I'm rolling my eyes.
No, yeah, I support explaining why that question was asked. What do you?
No, I mean, we don't trust. I don't want to. We should take. We don't trust the so-called system of American politics. We don't think our salvation will ever be reached through voting mechanisms, particularly within a system that is corrupt. But at times we see openings to push particular politics. So we don't trust democratic socialists, nor do we trust Democrats. And obviously we don't trust Republicans, because we know that there's a capitalist class that maneuvers to control the economics and politics of this country. So that's a quick retort to mean, again, that we won't participate as we see it strategic in certain elements of an electoral system. And I was going to use, before that, I was going to go back a little bit to, again, within the ideas of the Jackson Plan and the Malcolm X grassroots movement, and what we did in Jackson, Mississippi at the time was to try to get somebody elected, and they were elected on a Democratic Party ticket, although they were not a Democrat. And the purpose of that was to try to see if we could do something to shift the politics and economics of a city. But again, some of the limitations of both the organization, those of us as individuals within, and the weakness of our structure going into it, meant that, at least in my estimation, too much was played into the electoral process, whereas the building up of a grassroots effort to push those politics, even after somebody got in, wasn't ever sufficiently done. There was the People's Assembly, but the People's Assembly did not turn into the type of organization that pushed politics as opposed to supported a candidate, or one that exacerbated its own weaknesses by having too many committees as opposed to a solid political agenda that pushed the city, right? And what came out of that was, obviously Chokwe Sr. passed away, but Chokwe Jr. probably, again, in my humble estimation, didn't push policies that were beyond what any liberal mayor could do, even though he came from a radical politic. And so these limitations, there's the ways in which the state during that time period in which this so-called radical was elected, that the state itself took over city operations in order to show its power, its levers of power, right? It wasn't just going to allow you to take over. And then the question was, were we on the ground, or those at the time, I was no longer with the organization, at the time prepared for a fight back strategy, for a pushback strategy? And I think the clear answer was no, right? And so out of something like this, again, what people are evaluating are saying, what is happening on the ground that is going to be a counterweight that's not necessarily a pro-Madani counterweight, but a counterweight to when whatever rhetoric he's using or ideas, which I think most of us, at least at the beginning of his campaign, would say, oh, why we wouldn't, there's no reason not to support that. When he backtracks, or when they try to force him to backtrack, are there sufficient forces on the ground to continue to push those politics forward? Again, there were record number of turnout in this election, a record number of folks, young people, different folks voting. Surprisingly, he did well in Black communities, working class Black communities, working class Latino communities. So there is a fervor to say that New York City in particular is too expensive. And again, what you can also say is that 3 out of the last 4 mayors now in New York City have used progressive rhetoric, and that progressive rhetoric has worked to some extent to turn out a base of people. So all those people organized outside of the electoral process, are there groups on the ground who can sufficiently do that? How do we support groups who say they want to do that, or we believe want to do that, to make sure that that push happens, and to make our forces stronger, so that we understand that this is just one part of a larger structure or larger battle. And again, I think I completely agree with Jackie. There's things to be learned from DSA, even if I don't necessarily think their politics are about radical revolution. But they've done organizing on the ground, right? And they're not in the Worker Families Party, to be honest about including them in this conversation too. They're not as overtly adjacent to the Democratic Party as the Workers' Families Party is. They are seen as somewhat insurgent at times and not well liked by the party establishment. So I think those are all things to talk about, or to mull over and to fight about. Yeah.
And
well,
I
was just going to say quickly,
no, go ahead, Erica.
Just even in terms of Black Liberation Media, this is a channel of multiple tendencies and so we're not all one kind of ideological terrain, right? So even in terms of Black Liberation Media, I think we have, as a channel, have gone out of our way to kind of suggest or make suggestions about how we begin to kind of cultivate these ideas outside of the political apparatus that we understand, or at least making it clear or understood that there is a political apparatus that we would have to maneuver within. And so these are questions that from this channel and that have been seen on this channel, like Ed Brock, where these are plenaries, or just recently in Philadelphia, there was a gathering or a convening around the question of what is our role in political parties. And all of these are happening with members on this channel, with people who are engaged in this channel, just to offer a particular alternatives outside of the duopoly, because there's also the particular kind of snark around, well, where is the smoke from Mandami in being in the party? And I don't know if you missed the criticism of him still working with Zionists and still being critical and calling Cuba and Venezuela dictatorship, and being clear that rhetoric does not fall in line at all with what we're trying to do, both domestically and internationally, in terms of our organizing and how we understand the primary contradiction that we're all under. But there are different routes that this channel takes and different approaches that this channel takes, because there's different organizations that make up this channel. And I think that is kind of the combination of this channel, is to kind of point to that unifying movement, regardless of how we may be differing in understanding. So there is no particular channel-wide approach to this. And I think that's why we have these multiple conversations.
Mm-hmm. Wait, you're saying this isn't the party, Erica? This isn't.
Wow.
We're not the party? Okay.
I thought I was going to rise to the level of ministress of discipline for the state of Black Liberation Media.
Yeah, man.
I didn't realize. Okay, bye. That's not. No, I feel like this is very interesting because I feel like in a way, not to in the true sense of the phrase what it is, in a way, Black liberation media almost represents a kind of ideological united front that we actual leftists understand is key to the process of successful revolution against capitalism, imperialism, and understanding that revolution just means complete change of what already exists. So I like to think that what we represent as a channel is a coming together of people whose politics are not centered in the current system, whose politics are centered in some iteration or somewhere on the spectrum of leftism, I mean left of the Democratic Party and left of the Democratic Party. Although we may not all agree on where on that spectrum we are, but we are all left of the Democratic Party. We may not all be socialist, we may not all be communist, we may not have a description for what it is that we believe, but we do believe in people-centered human rights. We do believe in an egalitarian, open, equal, and truly democratic society. And we all believe that while we understand that some concessions can be made if we manipulate or use the levers in the system like DSA has done, and like we just talked about. Okay, Zohran Mamdani isn't a socialist. He's not really a socialist, even though DSA is not a part of the Democratic Party. He's also not a socialist. What can we get from him? What can we push him to do? But we also recognize the severe limitations of the current electoral system and this political reality in this country in regard to true people's liberation and real democracy and real equality. We've seen these things in other countries that this country, this government calls, third world countries, shithole countries. Their leaders are communist dictators, but those places, the Venezuelas, the Cubas, the Zimbabwe's, the Vietnams, those places, the Chinas, they have a true democracy. And we don't understand that because we've been so deeply indoctrinated to hate socialism and communism. There are reasons for that, but I think this channel represents this kind of united front to get people thinking very differently about this system as it exists and our role in it, and what people decide to do with that information if they feel like they have to vote for different people because of what they learn from us, or maybe they look at their own engagement in initiatives in their communities different. I think that's what we do. I think that is, or at least I think that's the utility we have for people right now, particularly in this moment, because the confusion is very deep. It is very deadly, and there are not a lot of people out here like us doing this pretty much for free. So,
well, speaking of somebody who doesn't do things for free, let's bring up the air doctor.
You already know it,
because I ain't get a hoodie yet.
Whoa!
Erica.
Yeah, look at Evan donating to the cause.
I had to get it myself, Erica. They didn't give me nothing.
I had to pay for my own hat. This is a $25 hat. This is a $25 hat.
That means you invest in yourself. I love it. I love it.
And see, some of us are still stuck in capitalism. Look at it.
Okay.
I invested. I'm a Patreon. I'm not only the president. I'm a Patreon member also. You know what I'm saying?
I'm not only the president.
This is real corporate. This is very corporate. This is like when I had to work at Kohl's and had to buy my outfit, my whole uniform from Kohl's.
Listen, we got you for Kwanzaa. All right, we got you, Erica. Hey, Evan, I know you. Evan, I know you got to leave, man. Any last words?
Nah, I'm so grateful to share the stage with my comrades. Where else are you going to get this kind of Black radical analysis? Like, share, subscribe. You know what I'm saying? Smash that like button. No, and I appreciate it. It was great to be here. Thank you. Right.
Well, we got a guest coming up, but I did have a question for y'all. Hoppo, who is this white woman?
That's great.
Here we
I gotta
go.
explain white people of all the questions.
Y'all know Kelsey Bond? She's a Democratic socialist here in Atlanta.
Aren't they
On the city
all?
council seat in Atlanta. Yeah.
In Atlanta, that's wild.
I mean, that's a whole nother conversation.
Gentrification is moving on in.
Contradictions and what the heck. But
More left, at least on paper than the current black mayor of Atlanta. So
yeah. And my last question about Mondani guy is what organization is going to hold him accountable? But we'll get back to that.
What does that mean? What is that? What is like? I like earnestly, like even when we talk about that in a broader sense with Democrats, right? Or people talk about we're going to push them to the left and we're going to hold them accountable. Like, is it them or is it the people? Right? Because like you can't. When we talk about existing in this apparatus, they're limited, right? Once they're in there, they can only work within the confines. Yeah. But if we can get the constituents, right, to kind of develop a mass understanding, then that I think shifts the conversation about what they're doing, right? So I don't know if it's so much holding them accountable, but I do think the question could be, how are we holding the constituents who then voted for him? Like, how are we holding ourselves accountable to them in terms of moving them towards a different direction? But then how are they also kind of like beginning to understand their own, political power, or developing that kind of understanding towards a political power? Because I mean, at that point, once they win, they can literally say "fuck you."
Yeah, yeah.
Like, you can't unvote it. You gotta wait it. You gotta wait it out. Can't say to vote that, right? So, like, I don't know what that means. But it's often said.
All right. Well, we'll get back to some more of that. We got a guest coming up, so let's go ahead and take a quick break and get right back to it right here on No Other Than a Remix Morning Show. Let's go. All right, it's time for a remix on the remix.
I wanna side. I wanna side. I wanna side. I wanna side with you. I wanna side with you when you cry. I wanna find some truth. Now ain't that love? Oh, ain't that love that I feel in my heart? When your friend turn me back on you, I'll be here just to see you through. Now ain't that love? Ain't that love? Ain't that love?
All right, let me take you to a time and place. Let me take you back to 1957 with Ray Charles off the album Hallelujah, I Love Her So. The name of that song is Ain't That Love, mixed with a little bit of 2021 with Common off the album A Beautiful Revolution Part 2 with Black Thought and Sean Kute. Name of that song is When We Move. Now, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new to the channel, go to patreon.com, become a member over there, get footage that's rare, donate where at blkliberationmedia.org. We appreciate everything you do. We are demonetized as a channel. That's why we bring that to you each and every week with that true, that real, and that's the deal. So with that said, let's get back to it right here on the Remix Morning Show.
When I move, y'all move in my way. Beat the energy, I generate. How to never move weak, I demonstrate. Celebrating my peeps when I innovate. For my dons and divas, weighing odds and evens.
Yeah. All right. Oh, we got everybody back. Okay.
I like that. It's good.
Yeah, a little bit of old school mixed with some new school Afro beats type mix. All right. Well, let me get up out of here and bring our guests through.
Oh, are you going to play the thing? Bring the guests through. Play that thing. Peace,
family. How y'all doing?
We're doing good. We're doing good. I think Erica might be having some technical difficulties. I think we were expecting her to do a little introduction of you and how you're here, why you're here, kind of thing. And she just went off the screen. So I believe you are here. Jackie, do you want to handle this, or should I jump in?
Now everybody has read. That's interesting. Is everybody back on?
It's me, you, and our guest.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks y'all for hanging out with us. This is the Remix Morning Show. Jackie Lukman, Kamal Franklin, Erica Keynes, and we do have a guest today. Thank you so much for joining us, Mossab.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, horrific events in Sudan. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Not a problem at all. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Mossab. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with my computer right now. I think I'm catching up. But yeah, thank you for coming. I know we tried to arrange this interview, but I did want to kind of give an introduction. Mossab Baba is a founding member of the Pan-African Forum, Sudan, and previously a member of the, you can correct me, the Garifna movement in Sudan. In recent years, Mossab has been a lead consultant for the IN network, as well as working with the new civic actors after the 2019 revolution. And for those of you who might have seen the AFRICOM webinar from the Black Alliance for Peace, Mossab was one of the speakers there. And a few weeks ago, I played a portion of his presentation because I think I met you at least twice here locally, and I'm always intrigued by the type of questions that you ask at our events, because you really come and challenge us. But so I do think that you're brilliant, and I've been seeing your pieces in bar, and I did want to give you a chance to come on and speak to them a bit, because there is not, I've been talking about the types of conversations that have been had around Sudan, and then the ways that people kind of level those conversations in a, versus the coverage on Gaza, right? So I do think that because of the way that people are speaking about Sudan impacts the way that we are able to really discuss it. So I did want to allow for you to really maybe give some context. So I'm a bit long-winded, but in your recent piece in Bar called Africa's Regional Neo-Colonial War, you say that the ongoing conflict in Sudan is a catastrophic manifestation of decades of fascist rule and intense regional imperial aspirations, and that the internal struggles have been weaponized by external actors, transforming the nation into a theater for neo-colonial interests. And so I wanted to allow you to maybe give more context to that before we dive into more deeper questions.
Thank you very much, Erica, Kamal, and Jackie. I mean, always appreciative of kind of giving a little bit bandwidth to the Sudan issue, because, it's just the largest humanitarian crisis on the planet right now, and it doesn't get its fair share, and partially because of how complicated the issue is. But essentially, Sudan has been, squeezed by neo-colonial interests for decades right now. Those of us who are old enough to remember, back in the, late 70s and early 80s, there was a switch in Sudan where it kind of started becoming an arm of U.S. policy in the region, and even, working against neighboring countries like Libya and Chad and Ethiopia. And after that, there was a period where they kind of went rogue, Bashir and his party. But, in the late 90s, they got put on the list of, 7 countries in 5 years, along with the rest of the kind of, U.S. Zionist targeted countries. And we've seen what happened to these countries one by one. But people kind of raise the question of, well, what happened in Sudan? All the rest of the countries were invaded, regime changes by force and everything. But Sudan was kind of spared from that military intervention. But the price was a compromise with the U.S. for a few things, to let South Sudan gain its independence. The assumption from the neocons was that, South Sudan was going to be a vassal state. But the South Sudanese stood up and, refused that. And unfortunately, they got, stuck into a perpetual cycle also of conflicts. But Sudan, I'm, 47 years old. So for my entire life, Sudan has witnessed conflicts, and our generations in Sudan were always asking the questions of why. Why are we always stuck in this cycle of, wars and internal conflicts? The first one is because we have a neocolonial governments that come time and time again. The Bashir government was there for 30 years, from 1989 to 2019. And they were masterful at walking that line between appeasing the West and, finding partners outside of the West, whether it's Russia or China or whatever. But the internal policies were the fascist policies that led to, South Sudan separating to its own country, the genocide in Darfur. Remember, a lot of us remember the Save Darfur movement in the 2000s. And the wars in the Nuba Mountains and the Blue Nile. So you had atrocities that piled up during that 30-year period. In 2019, Bashir was removed because it was the first time since independence that there's been consensus around Sudan about removing Bashir and setting up a diverse government, a plural government, a more inclusive government that doesn't strictly adhere to the kind of, strict, Arabo-Islamic creed that Bashir and his, counterparts tried to impose on Sudan and create like non-Arabs and non-Muslims as kind of second-class citizens. So that's the kind of core contradiction in Sudan that then allowed neocolonial forces to go into Sudan completely. And when we say fascism, we're talking about the whole, package, ethnic supremacy. We're talking about heavily capitalist, privatizing large sectors of the economy, selling off land and mining concessions and agricultural lands, and becoming a vassal even for regional wars and counterterrorism, so-called. The Bashir regime was famously like bringing in ex-ISIS fighters under the guise of the U.S. to quote unquote rehabilitate them in Khartoum with a moderate form of Islam, but it was still kind of under the imperial umbrella. 2019, when Bashir was removed, the head was removed, but the system kind of stayed in place. Yes, there were civilians that came in. The civilians were kind of favorites of the West, which also kind of, didn't really help them too much. But the actual power within the country, the economic power, the military power, stayed within the Bashir apparatus. Now, this Bashir apparatus included the NCP party, the kind of so-called Islamists in Sudan, but it also included the official army, the Sudan Armed Forces, which is SAF, and it also included the Janjaweed from the 2000s, from the Darfur massacres, which are now called the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF. They've been legitimized. That's kind of a big part of the tragedy going on right now, is that this RSF outfit was legitimized in 2013, from Janjaweed militias that were committing the atrocities in Darfur. They became legitimized and they started getting support from the outside. So, the European Union wanted to quell migration. So they funneled a lot of resources to Khartoum to support the RSF to control the borders, because Sudan is kind of a gateway to Libya and then Europe, so the whole Horn of Africa, we have a lot of Eritreans, a lot of Ethiopians that leave through Sudan, but a huge amount of Sudanese that have also gone in that fatal migration route over the Mediterranean. The Yemen war, the Saudi Arabia and the UAE, recruited not only the army, but heavily from the RSF. So it created a situation where the RSF now has like multiple cash cows. They took over a lot of the gold mines. They started creating their own economy within Sudan. And, the UAE has pretty much adopted them for a long time, using them in the Yemen war, working with them on the gold trade, livestock, these kind of trades. But more importantly, the UAE and countries like Egypt are involved in Sudan as part of a bigger coalition that includes the U.S. and Israel kind of coordinating the security the security aspects, and countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Egypt kind of working on the economic side of it, and the political also coercion. There's been a lot of hands in Sudan, especially since 2019. This war came as a result of the army and the RSF vying for power. A lot of even our people in Sudan, a lot of people are like, no, it's just an invasion by the RSF. Or the people who are more supporting the RSF, they're like, no, this is the historic repressive government of the army and Bashir and his Islamist party, and they've coordinated all the atrocities. Neither of them are entirely wrong, but the diagnosis for the war going on right now, as a colleague of mine, Nasreen Al-Amin, describes it, it's a regional counter-revolutionary war. The whole point of the war is to quell any of the movements, that happened, like when removing Bashir in 2019, or the predecessors to that movement and the people who kind of laid the foundation, which are the vast amount of political parties and civil societies that wanted to, get rid of Bashir and set up a diverse country and a sovereign state, as well as the armed movements. We have a lot of liberation revolutionary movements in Sudan that, since the days of South Sudan, there's been, it was days of Yongarang and the SPLM. You then had other movements that moved to actually liberate themselves from this kind of neo-colonial order. So all of that kind of came to a head in 2019 in removing Bashir. And the RSF and SAF are both part of the same Bashir apparatus. So they've been at war for over 2 years now, but they've been working together for 30 years. The RSF, maybe, let's say, since 2003. So that's more, 20 years with the RSF in the picture. But SAF has been at it for 30 years. 30 years is a long time to coerce not only the executive branch of the government, but also the legislative branch, the judiciary, like infiltrating all of these institutions and adding people in there. So, the transitional period that started in 2019 seemed that it would go fine until the previous regime started kind of plotting to sabotage that period and bring the military back to power in Sudan. And, we've been warning about the war for a long time. The handlers of these military forces, whether they're in Abu Dhabi or in Cairo or Riyadh, were always, they supported them, but even they probably didn't want this war to get this out of control, because, right now we have over 12 million people displaced as a result of the war. We have hundreds of thousands.
Okay, let me just jump in a little bit. I want you to talk a little bit more about that. You said at the beginning that this is the biggest humanitarian crisis on the planet right now, and I don't think people understand that or know that in terms of the scale. Can you talk a little bit more? I think you were just about the scale of the humanitarian crisis that the people of Sudan are facing, and a little bit of, I think you've done this already, but maybe just a little bit about who you hold responsible for that. But maybe just at first give us the scale of what's happening now so that people can have a clear understanding of it.
Right. So the war, this recent war started on April 15th, 2023. And it started in Khartoum. As soon as it started spreading over into Darfur and into other regions, you started seeing mass atrocities. So, ethnic cleansing campaigns. The RSF is historically kind of an, tribal Arab supremacist, kind of outfit. So they, ethnically cleansed like the Masalid group in West Darfur. And just recently, right now, the Al Fashir, has experienced the same thing. But the scale of it, we start looking like the 12 million people displaced. These are internally displaced and refugees. So you have millions of people that move to other parts of Sudan. I don't support either side of the war, but the main fact is that like the places that are under SAF control are relatively more safe than being under RSF. So you have the majority of those 12 million are internally displaced in Sudan from different areas. And then you have millions that have gone across the border to Egypt, to Chad, to South Sudan, to the Central African Republic, smaller numbers to Ethiopia, to Eritrea, to Libya. So even further, a little bit further out, like in Kenya and Uganda. So the 12 million people being displaced from their homes is an astronomically high number for any conflict. If you look at any of the conflicts that are going on, like the amount of displacement is kind of a huge indicator of the magnitude of the war itself. The deaths are the thing that are unknown because there's been a block on humanitarian workers. There's been a block on humanitarian aid. There's, it's impossible to go because, the violations, both sides kind of, lift their hands, especially the RSF, they're like, no, these bandits and these, road warriors are not part of our official forces. Like, dude, they have your uniform on, like, and the exact numbers of the death toll are unknown. But the estimate is in the hundreds of thousands right now because of like how long the war has been going on and how intense it's become. And if the displacement is any indicator of, what the death toll is, there's other secondary issues like the economy completely collapsing. Of course, the 90-something% of their budget in Port Sudan is going towards the war. Livelihoods, markets, all of these things have been destroyed. There are efforts from like grassroots and, activists and stuff to help out, for example, farmers unions in Sudan to help them, grow during the agricultural season, during the rainy season and things like that. But also the hunger crisis, and that's a big one. Al Fashir, the city that was just invaded by the RSF, I mean, they were reduced to eating cow feed, because of how, surrounded and how much of a siege there was on that city from the RSF. And, even the airdrops that used to happen and, were brought to them were starting to get shot down, by the RSF because they started getting more advanced weaponry through the UAE and through the international, arms market, anti-aircraft missiles and more advanced drones, things of that sort. But yeah, that's just to kind of give an idea of what the magnitude of the humanitarian crisis looks like right now.
Musab, quickly, just before, because I want to just ask this last question, and Jackie, I'm sure that you have something, because you raised the UAE and then the RSF's role in the conflict of Yemen, and I know lots of people, as of late, have been discussing the role of the United Arab Emirates, right? So, just in the context of neocolonialism, we understand that there has to be, for it to be neocolonialism, there's a colonial power that's kind of in the background, that's, maneuvering these comprador elites or this comprador class to make particular moves. So I did want to know if you could touch on the role of not just the UAE, but even in during the webinar for Black Lions for Peace, you had shown the map that Netanyahu had displayed at the UN. So I did want to know if you could touch on the role of the UAE, Israel, US, and even Kenya in this scramble, because I do think Kenya is less discussed. And I do think there's an interest point there because Kenya is making particular moves geopolitically, even involving itself in Haiti, being a partner to NATO. So just how does all of that impact the devastation, and also how we understand this sort of neo-colonial and broader colonial scramble for Africa?
Right. So, like I said, Sudan for a long time has been, kind of captive to its leadership, kind of, opening the doors for these neo-colonial powers to kind of take control of the security, the economy, the political process, all of these things. What happened in 2014 was kind of a shift where the Bashir regime was pressured after the Arab Spring and that fear of them kind of being overthrown. They went completely into the fold of the Gulf Arab countries. Egypt also plays a big part in that. And the common denominator among them is exactly that map that you mentioned, of the new so-called New Middle East. So here is Sudan, an African country through and through, being shoved into this new Middle East map. But unfortunately, its status is more kind of like the backyard of the Middle East, rather than taking its position among African nations and its neighbors and everything. It got pushed into this kind of subservient, role within the Middle East. And this is strictly a U.S.-Israel policy, when it comes to, things like the Abraham Accords. Here is Sudan removing Bashir and everything, and then they get squeezed by the U.S., saying that you have to sign the Abraham Accords. You have to pay us, half $500 million as, compensation for the families of the USS Cole attack in 2000 and the, Nairobi and Tanzania embassies attack. Like, that was 20 years ago. And we removed the guy who was incubating those movements. Like, why are you demanding this? So, but, that's the first reaction. But then you start realizing that this isn't about justice or about anything. This is about keeping Sudan in check, So the UAE kind of took the spearheaded this kind of neo-colonial order, because their relationship with Sudan is a classic kind of neo-colonial relationship where they're extracting resources, they're using Sudanese for their wars in the region, they're coercing the political process, buying off politicians, buying off armed movements, these kind of things, and, trying to get a port along the Red Sea, because Sudan, of course, has a long, shore along the Red Sea. So it was, on that side. And then you have on the side of Egypt, it's a bit more complicated. But the Egyptian elite look at Sudan also as like Egypt's backyard. The Egyptian elite, we know a lot of the revolutionaries and a lot of the people who were fighting for justice in Egypt, they just get bulldozed by the Sisi government. The Sisi government is kind of a continuation of this Egyptian elitist look at Sudan as being its backyard. So 2019, Bashir was kind of a little bit against the Egyptian government, was, had a pretty cold relationship with them, but he kind of warmed up to them towards the end, because he also realized that the Egyptian military elite, they want a military government in Sudan. They do not want any kind of democratic change in Sudan, any policies. There's a couple of reasons for that. One of the reasons, is securing the Nile waters. The conflict over water is real. There's a lot of conflict that happened between Egypt and Ethiopia, especially after Ethiopia made the GERD dam. So, that's and I don't believe the Egyptians look at that as the main reason, but it is definitely one of the reasons for why they want to kind of keep the areas to the south of them along the Nile Basin in check. But the Nile Basin is not just Sudan. It's Ethiopia, it's South Sudan, it's the Congo, it's Uganda, Kenya, so they've had an adversarial relationship with all of these countries rather than embracing them and also being a part of the continent. Now, that being said, since, the Egyptian government helped colonize Sudan twice, once under the Turks and again under the British, the Egyptians were kind of the handlers of it. And let me just say the elite and the ruling class in Egypt. And that kind of continued, even looking at the Sudan military as an extension of the Egyptian military. Part of this is internal aspirations in Egypt, but another part of it is imposed by the US and Israel. Egypt borders Israel. That's something a lot of people don't realize, but, Egypt is the gateway into Africa from the Middle East, and particularly the hottest place in the Middle East, the Gaza and Israel. Egypt borders them both. And that's why you see kind of Egypt being, even if they want to kind of, do an uprising and kind of have their own sovereign, policy and kind of detach from US and Israel policy, they're going to get hammered, whether it's by the US or Israel. And, they're right across the Mediterranean from Europe. So even these countries don't want a country of 120 million people to see destabilization, because guess where they're going to go? Straight to Europe, and the migration issue and all this. So there's a lot of complications in Egypt, but the result of these complications is that Egypt has to, the elite have to toe the line of US and Israel policy. And, even US policy is not exclusive in Sudan, meaning there's no direct US policy for Sudan. It's a coordinated policy with these countries, primarily with Israel, and then the secondary countries like the UAE and Egypt kind of intervening on behalf of US imperialism. So that's kind of in general how things have gone. Now, then there's the details of how they're involved in the war. Egypt primarily is backing the army, the SAF, and the UAE is backing the RSF. But when you follow the money and follow this support, it all falls under the US Zionist umbrella and that policy in the region. And that's one of the main reasons why you don't see a lot of in-depth reporting about Sudan on mainstream media. They're going to sidestep that. They can highlight the atrocities of what's going on the ground right now. And, it's still needed, to shed light on these atrocities. But the why and the how is rarely going to be discussed on any kind of mainstream media or corporate media or pro-Zionist media or pro-UAE media. The UAE have deep pockets. And, I just published the Neo-Colonial War in Sudan, the article on Black Agenda Report. And I put in there a map from a researcher that shows exactly how much the UAE is involved in Africa. This is not just Sudan. We're talking about the Sahel. We're talking about Central Africa, East Africa, the Horn of Africa. So this is kind of, the new neo-colonial order that we see, in the whole region. And that's why kind of the Sudan war has to be kind of a red flag for the entire region, rather than looking at it as just a war within its borders. There has to be a regional approach to end these conflicts, because the RSF is cross-border. It spills into Chad. They can recruit from across the Sahara desert. You have Sudan, Khartoum, and the SAF historically have had a very dark history of destabilizing other countries in the region, intervening in them on the behalf of the US, and sour relationships with a lot of its neighbors, you know. So it's a compound problem, but the result is regional chaos. And when you look at kind of how the war has affected its neighboring countries, it affected every single one of their neighboring countries in different capacities. So, you know, the idea of African liberation, you know, I think starts with taking a really hard look at the conflicts in the region. And it's not disconnected from what's happening in the Sahel region. You know, right. With the AES and everything, they're kind of fighting the same problem of, you know, foreign-backed destabilizing agents and militias and tribal militias and extremists and all of this stuff. And it needs a solid stand of sovereignty and liberation that comes, you know, from the people and from these factions. You know, Sudan might get there, you know, in the future, but right now it's more about kind of stopping this war and stopping the suffering that's happening to the civilians.
Yeah, I really appreciate all of this insight. You actually answered, Mossab, one of my questions, like, how did we miss this? But I think there is another aspect of it that I would love your insight on, because I want to go back to what you said about the 7 countries in 5 years. For people who don't know what that is a claim that was made by former NATO commander, General Wesley Clark from the Bush administration, talking about a 5-year plan after 9/11 to attack 7 majority Muslim countries: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Iran, Somalia. Now, we seem to have been kind of consistent, and by we, I think I mean the left or the anti-war population in this country in general. We seem to have paid attention to most of the other countries on that list. But how did we miss Sudan? I think I'm kind of intrigued by that, because when the current iteration of the conflict arose, immediately you hear the claims of, you know, we're not talking about this, and instead we're talking about Gaza because of anti-Blackness. But when you look at the list of 5 countries, or 7 countries rather, that argument kind of dissolves. So why was it so easy to keep this conflict the entire time almost undercover from a so-called American anti-war left that was hyper-focused on what Clark said and the outcome, but they ended up missing Sudan and Somalia also, I think.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Still missing Somalia, I would argue.
Yeah. And you know, even when you look at Somalia, you know, yeah, the US didn't go in officially like, you know, like Libya or Iraq, or, you know, intervene in Syria or anything, but the Somalia was also like, you know, you had peace in 2006, and then all of a sudden you had a US-backed invasion of it, and then you started seeing Al-Shabaab pop up, and that's not a coincidence. Yeah. Sudan is I think it's a little bit more complicated, because there's also, you know, on the continent, a lot of times we look at things like democratic change and, you know, things like that as being kind of, you know, Western backed, you know, rhetoric and stuff like that. We even got it from like a lot of Pan-Africanists that, no, Bashir was a good guy because he was against the West, you know, and, you know, there's a conspiracy against him and he's fighting the West. I'm like, do y'all know that, like, since day one, he's been implementing World Bank and IMF policies? Like, there's a you know, the Bashir's party did a number on the continent as far as convincing them that they're actually fighting against the West. You know, once the 7 countries in 5 years kind of, you know, the project for the new American century started materializing, you know, Bashir went and, you know, cut out a deal with the US, and the Bush administration kind of came down on him and, you know, forced him, because that's one of the reasons I think also that most of us who are older remember the South Sudan War. And once South Sudan gained its independence, a lot of people thought that, okay, problem solved now. You know, no more, because it was such, the rhetoric was such a duality. Just, you know, Arabs killing Africans and Muslims killing Christians. You know what I mean? It was kind of shaped in that form rather than looking at the reality of it, that the Bashir regime is a right-wing fascist regime that has been propped up by the US. You know, the Bashir's predecessor, Nimeri, was pretty much the CIA's man in Africa, being welcomed by Reagan and Bush, you know, by the New World Order guys, you know, and, you know, that's kind of why the story of Sudan is harder to tell, because of we don't have a clear view of where Bashir and his apparatus actually stood in reality. You know, you look at Libya, Gaddafi was very clear about his opposition and not playing ball and not cooperating with the West at all and trying to find African solutions. You know, Asias Afwerki in Eritrea is entirely clear on his opposition to the U.S. imperial world order. On the other hand, countries like Kenya is part of the Commonwealth and is seen as the main Europe and U.S. security partner in the region. You know, so when there's an uprising, I guess we know who the comrades are that are actually, you know, opposing this rule and this neocolonialism that's happening in Kenya. And that's kind of why Kenya was also used as a conduit, you know, for like, you know, supporting the RSF. But this is by a very small minority of Ruto and the people around him. Like the Kenyan population, once they found this out, like they were enraged. Like, how can you bring in a genocidal warlord and house him in Kenya? And, you know, the accusations of deals with, you know, gold smuggling and stuff like that through Kenya are pretty strong. And, you know, that's one of the reasons kind of why you see the Kenyan population flipping out a little bit. But you know, the layers of the conflict of Sudan make it a little bit of a difficult, you know, narrative and story to unpack. You know, I've spent hours just on interviews and trying to unpack it. And even me as a researcher, you know, sometimes I come to like, wait a minute, I haven't thought about that before. You know, it's you know, because of how complex it is, and because Sudan is a huge country that's very diverse with so many different groups. You know, you go into Western Sudan and you can think that you're in Chad or in the Central African Republic. You go to the east, you can't differentiate people over there from Ethiopians and Eritreans. You know, you go to the southern areas, you know, that's, you know, a part of East Africa unmistakably. You know, so it's even like, who is a Sudanese and what does a Sudanese look like? There's no caricature of a Sudanese and what Sudanese look like in the general imagination, whether it's in the U.S. or in the diaspora or anything like that. And I think because it's just not a simple, you know, homogeneous group, and you know, Sudan is huge and diverse, and we've had a lot of conflicts. Part of it is the geography of Sudan itself, you know, being a link between different regions in Africa, the Sahel, the North, East, the Horn, and the proximity to the Middle East, being on the Red Sea, you know, being there where the Sahara and the Savannah meet, you know, the Nile Valley. So it's Sudan, even historically going back thousands of years, has been kind of a superhighway of civilizations and peoples and movement and, you know, empires, you know, rising and falling and things like that. So, you know, we have a hard time kind of explaining the situation in Sudan, but because of how complex and compounded it is, especially when you look at the historical context.
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Yeah.
Oh. It's not going to be that quick, but I wanted to ask permission, of course. Two quick questions, or two questions within. One way in which a lot of times this conflict gets told to the West, in which we start to have some understanding of it, I think particularly for lay folks who are not like, lay folks who are not as understanding of the history, is one way is through the idea of the gold trade and or the theft of natural resources. I just playing this quick video that came up about which gives a classic tale of this is a gold shop in Dubai, and somebody's pointing out that this is a direct result of the bloodshed in the Sudan, facilitated by Kenya. And you touched a little bit upon the natural resources. I wanted to ask you maybe to go into a little bit more detail around how some of the natural resources have played into the conflict and how people are using or stealing those resources, and who's paying the price for that. And then two, as maybe part of a wrap up, maybe is to talk about who are the good guys. So who are the radical forces on the ground? Who are the revolutionary forces on the ground that we need to know more about, that obviously may be fighting for their lives now? But are there some groups and organizations that you see that are trying to untangle some of this mess, fight back either militarily or through revolutionary warfare or through other ways? Who are those groups that we need to know a little bit more about, who are countering some of the stuff that's happening, if there are any to speak of for you?
Yeah. Well, in addition, what could we be doing here as a left movement to amplify those people?
So maybe start with the gold thing and then move into those last two areas. Yeah.
Sure thing. Yeah. So Sudan is one of the countries that, it was never industrialized, but has a lot of resources, and that's always a very tough thing to a tough situation to work under, if you're trying to govern a country like this, because now you have to balance your raw exports with investments and money that should be used for industrialization and, infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, stuff like that. That never happened in Sudan. Instead, you started getting, from the Bashir government to like these current military leaders, is an extractive economy. And the money that comes in to prop up the security sector. There haven't been any highways in the last 40 years or so being significant highways being built. Even the infrastructure that was there, the railroad system has been destroyed. And this is all in favor of smaller privatized groups. So it's hyper crony capitalism that's been happening in Sudan, where resources, whether they're mining resources, agricultural resources, the livestock, that's a huge one in Sudan, have all been used to prop up these paramilitary groups, whether it's the RSF or whether it's, the quasi-military groups like Bashir's party, the National Congress Party, and these folks. When South Sudan, gains its independence in 2011, 70% of the economy of Sudan went along with South Sudan, because there was an over-dependence on oil. The oil concessions in South Sudan are huge. There's some oil concessions in North Sudan, but, and that's kind of what a lot of the wars were over. Early on when the U.S. was involved in the 70s and the 80s, they brought like companies, Chevron and these companies, to come and extract oil. Then when the Bashir regime flipped and did a U-turn, they started bringing in like the Chinese, the Malaysians, these. But once South Sudan gained its independence, then there became a scramble for new resources. Unfortunately, the new resource was gold. Sudan, if you look at the mining map of Sudan and where the minerals are, you're going to see huge repositories of gold, specifically in Darfur and in the northeast side. So a new gold rush started. I know like colleagues from back in school in Sudan who were, call me while in the US and say, hey, do you have some metal detectors? I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, they're like, no, we need metal detectors because we're going out to the desert and we're finding gold. I'm like, okay, is that the new hustle? They're like, yep. So it's spread out really fast. Even agricultural communities left their agriculture and went looking for gold. it became like a gold rush in Sudan, and this, of course, caught the attention of the government. They lost 70% of their economy with the independence of South Sudan. Now, gold has become the new rush, and unfortunately, when an outfit like the Janjaweed and later becoming the RSF, when they get a hold of it, it became the biggest cash cow for them. And it's not just them; like any armed groups around Sudan started looking at gold as a way to fund their operation. Now, if there was a national functional economy and this gold was going into a national reserve and it was used to prop up the economy and prop up the currency, like Sudanese could have been on easy street right now. But this was used strictly by like ruling military elite in Sudan, and all of the gold almost entirely would end up in the UAE, to the point where the UAE started bringing companies for gold refinement and stationing them in Sudan and partnering with the RSF on this. So this kind of created a situation where the gold resource specifically became the main driver of conflict. And that's why Sudanese for a long time were saying that, just like you had blood diamonds back in the 90s, there's blood gold right now, and primarily coming to the UAE. It is so crazy that even the Sudan armed forces that are fighting against the RSF, and they know the RSF is backed by the UAE, even the gold that they're mining in their areas, they're exporting to the UAE as well. That's how much of a monopoly the UAE has on economies in the region and how deep their pockets are. And they're using that for geostrategic hegemony in the region itself. But because of how flashy Dubai and Abu Dhabi are, and it's become a destination for entertainers, for all kinds of business, but also for illicit trade and money laundering and corruption and traffickers, whether it's gold traffickers or human traffickers. Like, people don't realize how much Dubai and the UAE are a safe haven for transnational crime. And, I can guarantee you, if you follow the money from all of the militias that are in the Sahel region that are causing instability, you're going to find, a direct line towards the UAE in one form or another. So it's kind of, read the book back in the days, The Oil Curse, and now it's pretty much the gold curse. And the biggest problem is that this is not just Sudan. It's Sudan, it's the Central African Republic, it's Chad, Niger, Mali. The idea of gold being the gold rush across the Sahel region and it being used to fuel instability and nefarious actors is a pattern that we see across the continent, east to west, unfortunately.
Yeah. I don't know if you answered the last question about the revolutionary forces.
Oh, yeah. So the litmus test for who's dedicated themselves towards African liberation and kind of a socialist order on the continent, it started becoming slimmer and slimmer with time, unfortunately. And that's because the war actually tore apart that movement. But that being said, though, groups like the Sudan Liberation Movement, led by Abdul Wahid Noor, they hold large areas of Darfur and the Jabal Marra area. They haven't joined the war. They've been consistent for the last 20 or so years of calling for a fundamental change in the government in Sudan and not being sucked into these wars against your own fellow Sudanese, and basically looking for a national comprehensive dialogue among Sudanese to solve the problems of this war and how do we prevent future wars. So this would include accountability and transitional justice and equitable share of resources and governance and stuff like that. There is the resistance committees that were formed in 2018 and 2019. These are grassroots, ground up, activists that were part of the movement to remove Bashir, but then they moved into trying to create social structures and institutions on the ground level, working to set up co-ops, working to, services locally within the community, working, I call them kind of Sudan's Black Panthers, as far as how they've moved and how they've actually, started doing community work while maintaining the political stance that the power has to be with the people, no more elitist, coercion of the people, and they've kind of after, the reason some people, call this a regional counter-revolutionary war is because nobody, none of the countries in the region want a model like that to flourish. People power, ground up, plural, each one teach one movement that would spread into all parts of Sudan. You have resistance committees in Al-Fashir, you have resistance committees in Adeleng, you have resistance committees in the north, in the east, and of course in Khartoum. So you had this consensus that materialized in the form of a grassroots movement, a decentralized movement that was starting to make huge waves. Even after the military coup in 2021, they were out in the streets. They made a charter. They got all on the same page saying we're going to create a revolutionary parliament that represents the people instead of this power sharing among political and military actors. And some of them are still active right now as resistance committees. A lot of them have become, working in the communities, in emergency rooms, in community kitchens to address the humanitarian crisis that's going on right now. There are some groups that have unfortunately joined the war on one side or another, but I believe they joined out of necessity, and I believe that they should still be engaged and worked with and talked to for them to tell their story about why they were forced to join the war. On the SAF side, you have the Sudan Liberation Army led by Minni Minnawi. You have the Justice and Equality Movement. Both of them were Darfur movements that have fought against the Bashir regime and the Janjaweed for over 20 years. But they put down their arms and they joined the transitional government in 2019. You have the SPLM North, the Sudan People's Liberation Movement North, led by Abdelaziz al-Hilu. They're in the Nuba Mountains. They got into a government right now with the RSF, but only because the SAF forces attacked them in their areas in the Nuba Mountains. And these are the complications that come out of the war, where you have people who are standing up for freedom, justice, and equality, and they get pushed into the war and they get forced into joining, one of these sides. That's why it's easy for me, being outside of Sudan and everything, to analyze the war, from more of a clear eye. But, if you have them bombs dropping on you, you don't have too many options. There's even some of the resistance committees that joined under SAF, under the national mobilization, because they woke up one day and they found the RSF moving into their areas. So they're like, okay, I guess the only thing to do is to pick up the AK-47. All that nonviolence and everything, we'll leave that, back then where it was. But this is the reality right now. And that's the true tragedy of the war, is militarizing people and shoving them into this grinder of the war. And it's a long-term tragedy also, because once people kind of pick up the arms, it's hard for them to put it down again. We have some political parties that are more on the neoliberal side.
We're gonna
sorry, go ahead, Kamal.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. We've reached our hour. So I want to thank you so much for coming on.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to pick up, Erica. This was fantastic information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I deeply appreciate it. I want to remind folks that you can find his article in Black Agenda Report. He also did another one to talk about the devastation that's occurring. So he does speak directly to the humanitarian crisis and what it actually means in a neo-colonial context. So you can find his writing on Black Agenda Report. Like I said, he's featured in Black Alliance for Peace's AFRICON webinar. So if you have not seen it, go back. He gives a lot of context. I already knew what I was getting into. You know, Masaba always tells you that you have to cut him off because he is that thorough and he is so informative. But I do not think that we do get a chance to get this level of analysis on Sudan. So I don't like to cut you off, but we have reached our hour. So thank you so much for coming. And we look forward to having you again in the future so that you can give us even more context.
Thank you so
I
much.
really appreciate it, y'all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother,
so
man.
much.
Thank you.
Peace
Okay,
and
on
blessings.
On that note, we reached the end of our Remix Morning Show. Thank y'all for joining us. Peace, everybody. We're out.
Yes.
Remix.
Oh, you're...
Remix. 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 Remix.